Hello everyone. Am I audible? People at the back? All right. So, I am Deboshmita and you might have remembered me from the UI Next event. So, I lead the Flutter practice here and I have done some web development, also mobile app development. So, currently I am really smitten by Flutter and so throughout the workshop I can share my experience. So, are you excited to learn Flutter? Yes. All right. But before that, we need to learn about Dart, right? Because Flutter uses Dart behind, this is the language. So, I will be explaining some of the basic concepts of, and then we can move on to Flutter. All right. So, this is an overview. So, I am explaining variables, data types, and functions, operators, control flow statements, and classes. So, before I even start, have you heard about Dart? How many of you heard about Dart? Okay. And any one of you tried Dart? Maybe have a look at it. So, I think I can change some minds here today. All right. So, let us just start. So, we have pretty very less time. So, what I did is I have the program with me and I can explain along the way. You can do the coding. All right. So, this is a basic Dart program and as you can see, this is a main function. So, Dart starts from a main function. This is the top level function. In this line, you can see that you can write a variable using the var keyword and initialized it with a string. So, and you can see also that I have a function here which prints the season. So, let me just run it. People at the back, can you see the screen? How about now? I know it's not winter, but for some people winter is coming, right? All right. So, let us just move to variables. Visible? Okay. So, as I said, you can write a variable using the var keyword and here I am initializing it with winter. There is another variable and I am initializing it with a value of 10. So, the first concept is Dart is an object oriented language. So, everything you can see in Dart is inherited from the class object, right? And Dart can infer types. So, Dart is a strongly typed language, but it can infer types. All right. So, here you can see the concepts. And another thing is, like Java, Dart does not support any access modifiers. So, if you start your identifier with a underscore, it will be private to that library. I think these are the concept which is, yeah.
Can you turn on the volume of your Zoom?
So, let us just move into the coding thing, right. So, here. So, let us see how Dart can infer types. So, if you have these runtime type, you will get the type of this season. So, let me just print it. You can see that we have string here. So, Dart is inferring types. If I print a number, it will get me a number. Int, all right. So, let us move on and so, here you can, so as I said, Dart can infer types and also Dart is strongly typed. language. So I would really recommend you to write types before the variable. So here you, as this, I mean I have written string over here. So, and if you don't want to mention any type, maybe it can be the value can be of integer, maybe of double or something else, you can use dynamic. With the is keyword, you can check if the variable is of a type. All right. If you don't understand, you just can raise your hand and ask any question. All right. So the uninitialized variables have an initial value of null. So here I didn't initialize the variable count. Let's print it. Here you can see you are getting null. All right. Yeah, everything, if you can do not initialize anything in Dart, it will have a default value of null. Okay. Let's say you are getting, maybe you are doing an HTTP call, right? And you don't know what value you will be getting. Maybe it can be an integer, maybe a double or something. So you can use dynamic over there. All right. So here you can see I have initialized with final. Now what is final, right? So when we write any variable, we expect that throughout our program that variable's value will be changing. That's why that is called variable. Now if I know that my variable won't be changing throughout the program, I can write a final keyword before it. So let's see if I try to initialize this final variable, what happens. So now all of a sudden if Jon Snow wants to become Targaryen, we cannot do it, right? So let's just run this program and see. You can see error over here also. I am not getting it. So you cannot reinitialize any final variable. Now what is constant, right? So generally what in Flutter what we do is, let's say there is some color. Maybe you are writing a success button, error button. So all of this buttons color will be same throughout the program typically, because error generally it takes red color and success it's green color. So we mention it in constant. Sorry. All right. Give me a second, huh? Yeah. So we can mention it in constant, and also constant variables value you cannot change it throughout the program. Now what is the difference between a final and a constant, right? So final is a keyword and constants will be compile time constants. Now what does that mean, right? So something that doesn't change when you compile the program. So if I do initialize date time now in a constant, you can see we are getting some error, right? So we are getting that the constructor being called isn't a constant constructor, and constant variables must be initialized with a constant value. So you cannot initialize any dynamically changing some values with a constant variable. So I think we are done with the variable. Let's just revise it. So in variables, what did we get? We get that uninitialized variables will have an initial value of null. Then final variables can be set only once, and then constant is a compile time constant. So you cannot initialize with the time which is changing, right? So let's go to built-in types. So Dart has strings integers, booleans, and doubles also. It has lists which can be known as arrays, and then it has sets, maps, and runes. All right. So I'm just gonna zoom it. People at the back, it's visible. All right. So here is an example of how we can write an integer and double. Now remember, there is a keyword or type called num. So what num typically is categorized, maybe subcategorized with integer and double. So if you write int count, it will be a integer, double, it will be a double, but give me a second please. Just. So this is an example of integer, this is a double, and if you write num x equals to 1, what will happen is num can infer type. So if you provide an integer over here and you print the runtime type, you will get an integer. And if you provide maybe some decimal points, so you will get a double. So I'll just run it for, before the line you can see double, right? So this is very useful in Flutter. So here you can write the string with the string type over here. What I have done here is I have taken a double value and there is a function, right? So what does it do? Now let's break the function. So here it says toString. So it converts this double to a string value and then it says as fixed 2, right? So if you provide 2 over here, the it will get decimal, it will get the 2 values after the decimal point. Maybe if I provide a 3, it will get up to this, all right? So this is also very helpful to from double, if you want some decimal points to be rounded off, you can use this thing. Now the interpolation, all right. So if you want to print a variable inside this print method, now in Dart, just like JavaScript, we have console log, something to print on console. In Dart, it is called print. There is a print method. So if you do the interpolation, you can do it with this dollar syntax. And what if, let's say, count is a map and it has a field called something called sum. So then you have to use this literal. Sorry. All right. Now runes are so strings. In strings, Dart uses UTF-16 code points, right? So to distinguish between runes, which will be typically the smiley keywords or smiley words or some characters, so we differentiate with it we take runes as UTF-32 code points. So typically a rune start with a backslash and then U, after that there is a literal, and inside that there is a value. So when I print this, let me print, I think I have printed it, right? Yeah. So you get a smiley keyword. Boolean, I don't think I need to explain. So with bool type, you can get a boolean and there is a value true and false. Let's just move on to lists, right? So lists are typically arrays. So in Java, you have maybe array list, and in JavaScript, you have arrays. So you can write a list using the var keyword also, and this is the literal to write a list. Now, if you want to provide a type to this list, give me a second. So yeah, so if you want to provide a type to this list, you can just have the list, and then you can provide dynamic if you don't know what to put in the array. So when you write list dynamic, it will have in that array you can have anything, any type of variable like string, integer, boolean, anything. But if you if you get the type as list integer, then it will only take integers. If you want to put something else, it will throw you an error. So there is a typical curd operation of numbers. So I am adding one number which is 4. So let's see, and then so what so when I add a 4, it will add this, so the array will be like this, right? Now I am adding a integer over here, and what I am doing is, you know what filter does in Java. How many of you know that filter operation? And in Java, what is that? Okay, so yeah, so you can do it in Dart using the var keyword. So when you the var method. So when you put var and then this run this method, what it typically takes is it loops the array and it gets a single element, and then it executes this statement. What is that? That it takes a boolean true or false, right? So from this expression, what we can get is, we are checking if the number is equal to 4. If the number is equal to 4, then it will get that number. So after this operation, what are you expecting to get? Can any of you answer? Sorry, didn't get you. Only 4, right? But it will be a iterable. It will be of type iterable, not type list. So to make it to a list, we use toList method. Alright, so after this operation, we will get an array or list with the element 4. So now let's see if we can check if a element is present in an array. So we can use it with contains. So I have run this program. Let's see, where is it? Okay. So here you can see you are getting only 4 as an array or list. Here maybe I have printed the whole array. Yes. And here we are seeing that if 1 is present in that array. Alright, it's true. So let's move to sets now. Now what is the difference between a list and a set? Can anyone tell me? Okay, sets are ordered and it takes unique elements, right? So if I initialize with this, what will happen? We will get only 1, 2, 3 and 4. This 3 will be omitted. Now, sorry. Okay. So with this set type, we can declare a set, and we have to use this set literal. Thus operations are same as this list, so I am not explaining it again. You can just explore it. This is a typical map. It contains key value pair. And what is the thing that is unique about a map? It takes unique keys, right? So in this variable, I haven't put the map type, right? Here, if you want to use the map type, you can use it, and I am providing type as string and string. So the type of the key will be a string, and I am also providing that the type of the value will be a string also. So if I provide maybe an integer, I need to change this to dynamic, right? And here is how you can access a key in a map. You have to use this square braces. You can see that I am getting value 1. Yeah. So what did we learn in built-in types? That we have numbers, but numbers are subcategorized into integer and double. Then we have strings, booleans, lists, which are array, which are known as arrays, and then we have sets. The differentiation between is set has unique numbers, and then maps, runes, and we have symbols. We don't use symbols that much. All right. Let's go to function. You have seen a typical function when I have shown the basic program, right? So I will keep this example really related to Flutter. So what I am doing is I am taking a map of string and dynamic. So the keys will be string and the values will be dynamic. It can be anything. And this circle has key, radius, color and border color. Now what I am doing is I am painting this circle. So there is a method called paint, and it takes 3 arguments. So I am printing this circle. Now what will happen if I do not pass this last parameter? Can you guess? You can see it, right? It is throwing an error. So you have to remember that if these parameters are required parameters. So if you declare a function with some 3 arguments, you have to provide 3 arguments. Now what if I don't know if I have border color or not, right? So then, so there comes the optional arguments or optional parameter. So if you provide a square brace around the last parameter, it will work. So I am not providing the border color, and I want to run this program. As you can see, this is a blue circle of radius 8 with border color null, because you must have remembered that if you do not initialize any variable, it takes null. So you can just start the literal from here, the square brace, then every parameter will be optional. All right, let me go back to the previous step. All right. So now in Flutter we have so everything is a widget, and we have multiple parameters over there. So maybe to paint a circle, you will have to provide the color, the radius, the border color, maybe the diameter. So let's say there are 10 parameters you have to provide. Now you have to mention the sequence. You have to remember the sequence of that function, and you have to provide the parameters like that. What if it has 10 parameters, I might forgot the sequence, right? So then what you can do is you can make these parameters as named parameters. Now when I do this, you are seeing that we have to remove it. Okay. So you can see that we are getting an error. Now another thing to remember is, when you make a parameter, named parameter, it will be always optional. So now how can we pass those parameters, right? So let's say I want to pass radius first. So I can do it like this. Then maybe border color. After that, color. All right. Now we are not getting the error. And if I print it, you can see it, right? So another thing to remember is, remember that we were not passing the border color in the first example. So let's do that. Don't pass the border color. So we are expected to get a null over here, right? So we can get null values, but by default I wanted to take red as a border color. So you can initialize it over here. This is called default parameters. So when I run it, it will print red. what if I have the red over here default as default parameter, and then also I am passing the border color as, let's say, black. Any guess what it will take? All right. So let's just revise again. So we have required parameters in function, we have optional parameters, and that again categorizes in positional optional parameters and named parameters, right? We also have default parameter values. So you either have to print it, or if you are printing all of the variables, you will get null, right? So if you don't want to get null, you can initialize it with default parameter. Yeah. So then where was I? Yeah. So you are printing border color, right? So yeah, and you are not passing border color. So it will take it from somewhere, right? So it's not initialized. If you are not passing this border color, it will not get initialized. So it will take null. If you don't want to print, then you can just omit it, but you want to print it, and if you don't know you are getting null or something, right? It is getting initialized or not, then you can use the default parameter to avoid getting null. Okay. Can you put dictionary? Where do you? Sorry. You can do it. I mean, yeah. So you are asking that you will be getting a key, and inside value we are getting map. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
They are asking like how you are going to access a nested map, right?
Huh. So you can use two square braces.
So you can use two square braces, and like you can give the key name. So like map can be a key, right? Or
Yeah.
like the key can be have map, something like that.
You can access the key, and then you will get the value, right, when you access the key, and then after inside that, yeah, you can get another key of the second map, right? Any more questions around map? Yeah.
So when we specify dynamic, will it accept set or list?
When you specify dynamic, it can you can get integer, maybe string, boolean, any type. List or set of map.
Yeah. So like if you want to pass map or list to a function, you can specify the type, right? So if she says dynamic means what actually? So dynamic means like in JavaScript, right?
It's like
It is
any
runtime typecasting will happen.
Types.
So when you pass a set or map, it will work, but maybe your code won't work actually. That's why we have strictly type. So you need to make sure like your code should be always working.
Okay. Can I move on to classes? Okay. All right. So here is a typical class. You can use the class keyword and then write the class name, and in class we use always the first character will be in capital. So here is a class shape, and it has a member variable which is area, which is double, and this is the constructor of this class. So now what if I want to extend it? So this circle extends this shape. So when you want to inherit a parent class, you have to use this extends keyword. So now in circle we have radius, color, diagram, and this member variable. Now I want this is a constructor of this circle, and as this is a child class, it needs to call the super, because super this is the constructor of the parent class. So that's what super does. Now you can see that there is another constructor. Now typically why we use a named constructor is generally when you get response from HTTP calls, those are JSON, or maybe they can be maps. So we can get the data And we can initialize the circle member variables like this using the named constructor. And also as you know that we need to call the super, the constructor of the parent class, so we are using this super. So there is another method in the circle which does the same thing, it paints. So in the main function, as you know that Dart, any apps which is written in Dart, it will start from the main function. So I am getting an object of the circle and I am painting this circle. Okay. All right. So let's just come to the operators later. So in classes what we have seen is member variables and method and constructor or named constructor from the from JSON constructor, and we have seen how we can do inheritance, right. So now this is a very interesting part, I would say. Yeah.
Does it have an import constructor?
Yes, you have to write it. I mean,
Okay.
this is the default. Yeah.
It has an import constructor. Is when we are extending or inheriting, we still need to write super?
Yes, when you write extends, you have to write super, right? I think I am right. Okay. So, any questions around class? This, okay. This one? Okay. So this is the default constructor. So when you write a circle, you can mention this like this, right? So it will take 8 and red and this value, and it will execute this constructor. It's defined in the parent class, right? So this variable will automatically be here in the circle class. And when you want to call the from JSON, you can call it like this. This is circle cc dot. Then you have to provide a map, because I think I am expecting a map over here, right? Here. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so when you are accessing this super construct this parent class constructor, this is the way you do it. This is the same thing you are mentioning over here, right? So this is the same thing you are doing over here. So
This is actually you're calling a parent with the data. Yeah, so like it's a syntax in that.
yeah, for calling the super constructor, I mean the parent classes constructor. Any questions on classes? No? Okay, I'll just move on. So I think this is the most important part or interesting part. You all know how operators look like, right? I don't have to explain what plus do, minus do, right? Do you agree? Yeah. So let's move on to some interesting operators. So I'll be explaining some of these operators that I really use in Flutter. This is a ternary operator, and there is null check operator, something else, and fat arrow notation and cascade notation. Okay. So first the ternary operator, right? So ternary operator works like this, right? So let's say there is a value. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Sorry, oops, I cannot do it. Visible? Okay. So now how ternary operator works like is let's say there is a variable data. I am checking if it is greater than 5, then I will print something, say 5, or I'll print, if it's less than 5, I'll print 0. So this is the expression. You evaluate this and then you ask it that if this thing is true or false. If it is true, it will call this expression will get executed, and if it is false, after colon whatever that is, it will get executed. So then we have the null check. I suppose we have the null check operator, right? So let's say you are getting some values again from some HTTP call, and you don't know if you have got null or something. So this null check operator we really use in every day. So all right, we have lost it again. Perfect. So here what I am doing is I am initializing one circle, and there is another circle which is not initialized yet. So if I print let's say whatever it prints, it's not printing anything. Okay, so it checks if this circle is null or not with the null check operator. So let's just print it. Let's say another circle. So it checks if it is null, then it will execute this statement. So that's why ABCD gets printed when I'm printing this circle. All right. So now there is this. So let's say now I haven't initialized these another circle, right? And then I don't know if I have initialized it or not. So when if I try to access the member variable of this circle, it should give me null. But in Dart, it gives you an error. It throws an error. So it would be really good if we get null instead. So this operator, whenever you check it, if it is another circle is null, you cannot access the member variable, and it will give you null if you try to access it. All right. So there is this operator. Okay. Now what it does is, I haven't initialized till now. Yeah. So what it does it checks if this circle is null. If it is null, it will initialize it. So for this operator gets we can use it, right? So now what if I want to initialize it again with this operator? Would it be initialized? So what if I get the whatever that was, what if I get the radius? So here I am initializing it with 10. Now again I am using this operator and initializing it with 11. So if I print, you will get 10, right? Yeah, so I don't need to print it. So there is a fat arrow notation. So this is, I think you have used in JavaScript. This is vastly used. So it typically what it does is, let's say there is a function check if circle valid. So we are using we are returning only one statement, and we are not doing any computation inside this function. So we can remove this literal and use a fat arrow, and we can omit the return keyword. So this is I think it makes the code look very good. So there is no extra codes, and this cascade notation. All right. So what it does is, so let me just go to here. All right. So what it does is, if I want to make the initialize this circle, and I want to have the value of radius 8 or maybe red, and then after that 13. So I can do it in a single statement. So after that you can write radius equals to some 10, color equals to black, so it's getting me error because I haven't, I have constructor or default constructor, and then maybe border radius something else. So after doing this, you will get a circle with all of these values. So cascade notation gives the whole object if you want to initialize it like this. So I think okay, so we are at the end of these basic Dart session. So do you have any question for me? No? All right. So yeah, thank you all for joining this session, and have patience throughout the session. Okay.